Welcome to Let's Build a Data Studio Community Visualization Part 3. In the last video we created our first table in Data Studio. This time we enhance our table by adding data from the comparison period. So let's start. When you take a look at the table we created, and especially at the data panel of this visualization, you will notice that besides the default date range, there's no option for adding some comparison data here. Like when you add some other table, a regular table here, and you take a look at the date range there, you will see that you can add a comparison date range. Let's do it with the previous period, and it gets added to the table. But for our community visualization, we need to add some setting. And this can be found in the config.json. You will find it right at the bottom of the JSON file, and it's here under Features, Enable Comparison Date Range. And by default this is set to false, so we need to set it to true. Let's save this file and re-uploaded it to the cloud storage. With the updated config.json, after a reload of the Data Studio report, our visualization has a comparison date range. We can activate it, set it to previous period, and apply. And of course nothing happens here in the data we see, but let's check the console. So in the tables variable, we see a comparison table and a default table. And you even see that the comparison table has more rows than the default table. So it's formatted in the same way with dimensions and metrics. The first being home and direct with all the metrics, the second being Google Online Store Direct, and in the default it should be the same, which with home and direct and Google Online Store and Direct, but this is only a lucky coincidence because the order of these two tables do not match. Data Studio is sorting these two tables independently, so we need to join them with some JavaScript. My first idea to join two tables with JavaScript was to create a loop to run through every dimension combination in a default table and compare that with every dimension combination of the comparison table. This worked fine in the first test, but for tables with more than 1,000 rows, the performance began to slow down drastically. After testing out other methods, I ended up creating a dictionary with the stringified dimension combinations as keys. Since dictionaries are sorted alphabetically, the lookup in it is much faster. So this is what it looks like in the code. So we start with creating a copy of the two tables, of our default table and of our comparison table. Let's do that. Let's name the default table def. We can set it as a variable and say it should be this data dot table tables.default, and I want it to be a deep copy since I want to change something in this def variable but not in the this data. So I'm going to say json.parse of json.stringify. So now if I change the def variable, the this data should stay the same. Let's do it with the comparison as well, but only if the comparison is there. So we say if this data dot tables dot comparison, then var, I name it conf, the comparison table, and I'm doing the same here again. let's change the default to comparison. Now let's create our comparison map. So we're going to create a new variable named comp map, which is an empty JSON variable. Then we're going to create a loop for every row in the comparison table with for var I equals null. I should be smaller than the comparison length, and I plus plus. And for each row of our comparison table, we want to create an entry to our dictionary, comp map, and then we stringify each dimension combination that we have with json.stringify of our comparison row and the dimension. So with this key, a new entry will be added to the comp map variable, and it should be the metric So it should be the metric here. Our dictionary is now done. We can console log it to check it later. Console log comp map. And then we can continue with querying this comp map variable. So for all the rows of our default, var I equals null, I is smaller than def length. So for all of our rows in the default table, we can create a new comparison variable in it with def I dot comparison metric. Let's name it comp metric equals comp map. And now we query the exact entry of the dictionary with JSON stringify of our def dimension. So this way we reduce the number of loops I had in mind in my first idea to only one loop in the comparison and one loop in the default table. But let's add an exception here. If we do not have a combination of dimensions in the comparison table that we have in the default table, I want to set this new variable to null. So let's do with two pipes and then null. So this way our data is either the comparison value or null. I want to do a console log and see what we got after re-uploading. So it looks like we made a mistake. Uncaught type error, screen orientation stringify is not a function. I don't know what I did here, screen orientation, but let's see it in the code. Oh yeah, okay, so this is obviously a mistake here. Let's change it to JSON and then try it again. So this time it worked. We still have the error here, but we do not pay attention to this right now. We see the comparison dictionary here. So you see what it looks like with all the dimension combination as keys and the metrics as values. And as you see, it is sorted alphabetically, A, and so on. And underneath we have our def variable with dimensions and metrics, and now we have a comp metric, a third one, with our comparison metrics. There we go. This looks all right. Let's do a little test and search it manually. The comparison metric for home direct should be 14485. Let's see if it's there in the tables. The comparison for the home direct is 14485. It looks all right. Okay. Now we can add the new data to the table. But before we do this, let's take a look again at the code. Over here, we defined our comparison variable only if the comparison data is there. We should do the same thing with our left join scripts. So we should do if comp for everything where the comparison is needed. And it goes from here to here. So this way we do not run into an error if we have no comparison data at all. Okay, so now let's check our table and add the comparison data here as well. At first we add it to the head row. Inside of the metrics loop, we add a condition if comparison is there. And then let's add a new cell and append it to the head row as well. Let's add a new cell with the same th tag, and the inner text should be the delta sign. So I have it right here. You can search it in the internet if you do not have this. And yeah, this should be all right. So if there's comparison data, for every metric, we should see a new column right next to them with delta sign as its name. In the table body, we do the same thing. We're gonna go to the metrics loop, and then let's add an exception. We can use this code again. But instead of the th element, this time we need a td element since it's not the table header. And for the inner text, we want the comparison metrics of our def variable. So we want the def in the j row and the comp metric I. This should work for all the rows where the comparison metric is there. But if it's null, I want the inner text to be 0. So I'm gonna add another condition with the comp metrics and say if the comp metric is defined, then cell inner text should be the comp metric, and else the cell dot inner text should be 0. So another re-upload, and let's check how it looks. So this is how it looks, and it looks like we did a mistake. I think this shouldn't be in the head row, so let's check our code again. There we have it. Yeah, we do not want to add all these numbers to the head row. Instead, we want to add it to the row. So save it again and hope this time it works. So there we have it. Our table looks good now. We can even sort by our comparison values. These are comparison values and not the relative or absolute changes now. We're going to do this in a later video, but I think it should be fine for now. Let's add some more rows here to see more data. Yeah, this should be all right. So that's it for today's video. Next time we look at the different types of dimensions and metrics, and we try to put them in the right format. So see you then.